Hello and welcome to another episode of the Film Nerd Podcast. This is episode 9. My name is Vince, and I'm joined tonight by a special guest. I have with me Mr. Kory Schrauben. He's one of my very closest, oldest, and best friends. I've had the pleasure of being the best man at his wedding, playing football with him, coaching football with him. He's a fellow Lansing and a native and fellow graduate of Grand Ledge High School. He now lives in Grand Rapids with his wife, Maddie, on the west side of Michigan, and works for Coca-Cola out there. He usually hits me up now for movie and TV recommendations because we don't get to watch them together as much anymore, unfortunately. Very sad about that. But Kory, welcome. How you doing?
Thank you for having me. I'm good. First time on here, kind of salty that I haven't been asked earlier, but I'm over it.
Hey, man, we talked about trying to get you on earlier, and it just didn't get it to work initially. So you're here. That's all that matters, that you're on. You're here.
I am.
So do we want to talk first about, I didn't put it on our script here, but do you want to talk first about your rule of thumb for hitting me up for movie and TV recommendations? You want to tell the people about that?
No preface. I hate asking. The only film guy I know, every time I ask him for a movie recommendation, I get 400 questions. So from now on, I don't even ask you anymore. I just give me a movie. Sometimes I'll surprise you with a couple questions, like you get 2 questions limit, but just give me a movie. I don't care what it is.
For anyone listening, you may think he's joking, but he will literally text me verbatim. He will go, give me a movie recommendation, no questions. Meaning I can't ask him questions to help gauge what kind of a recommendation I would give him, because he got tired of me asking too many questions to try and figure out what to recommend him. So now he just says, just give me a recommendation. I don't care what it is.
No genres, no what are you in, what do you want from it, nothing. Just give it to me.
Just raw, just live, make it happen. Whatever happens. So anyway, how's life been, man? I know you and I, we talk all the time, but for the sake of the podcast here, how's life since COVID, this last year, now that we're, passing the year mark here? We already passed the year mark, I believe, since things started shutting down. So how have things been? I know things have gotten better for you lately, but in the current state of things for you?
Things are good. It's been a crazy year, like everybody's kind of experienced, but my 2 best friends had babies. I moved to Grand Rapids.
I'm one of them.
Yes, you are. You actually are having 2, so things escalated quickly.
As we speak, another one is coming with this week or next week.
Oh, the bun is almost cooked.
Yeah, it's getting
literally and figuratively. But no, things have been good. We moved to Grand Rapids. We love it out here. Bought a beautiful house. Transitioning. Maddie's still working in Lansing, so we still have that kind of baggage, but she's trying to get transitioned out here and whatnot. So life's been good. Work's good. Fun. Whole new challenge, but nothing new really.
Whole new world. Nothing. Not too much to complain about, which is good, right? Got your health, got your home, got a job. I mean, honestly, for us, that's more than most. I mean, you hear about so many people have lost their jobs and, got, evicted from homes and, obviously lost family members or people have gotten sick. So yeah, you and I and our families are definitely on the right side of things there. Gotta feel blessed in that regard. That's for sure.
100%. Yeah.
Well, on a less somber note, so I don't want to get too sad here. So let's move into something a little bit more fun to chat about. So this is a movie podcast. However, Kory and I are big sports guys, and I would be remiss not to mention that for the first time in 2 years, we have March Madness back, the NCAA tournament, as of right now. So we're recording this together right now at 8:30 on a Tuesday night. March Madness is supposed to tip off Thursday night, so fingers crossed that it does happen. Was very unfortunate that we didn't get to have it last year, obviously with a lot of the unknown. I don't blame the people in charge for kind of cutting things short and canceling everything because there was so much unknown at this time last year. But I just feel grateful that hearing on CBS them announcing the teams, I feel like we haven't heard that in 2 years. So it just kind of to hear that, you kind of take it for granted how much you enjoy it. But Kory's a Michigan fan. I'm a Michigan State fan. So we both live in the state of Michigan. Big rivalry, obviously, between the two. So what are your thoughts going into this tournament, maybe in general? We can get into Michigan State stuff, but what are your kind of thoughts coming into this?
I just hope they make it work. I mean, you brought up CBS. It was so awkward watching the teams like half-heartedly celebrate with social distancing and masks, and
Yeah, all
some
spread
of
out.
them
Some of
were
them were all spread out in
some
a
of them at
gym.
football stadiums.
Yeah, I
There was a
saw
couple
that.
of them like football stadiums in the
I saw that.
background. So, no, I'm excited. It should be a great venue, having everything in Indy. Teams should be well rested, no travel.
Well, especially the
So
Big
things
Ten.
should
I
be
mean,
good.
the Big Ten teams literally had their tournament in Indy, turn around, and they just get to sit and wait. The ones who made the tournament
Yeah.
don't have to go anywhere. So yeah, speaking of Big Ten, Kory's a big Michigan guy. So what are your kind of thoughts going into the tournament here for the University of Michigan? Where are your Wolverines at? I know obviously there's some tragic news with Isaiah Livers, but Eli Brooks is healthy though, pretty much now.
He was good. He looked sluggish in the Big Ten tournament. Kind of looked timid on the ankle, which is kind of expected after you. I mean, if you've ever rolled on your ankle, it's like a splinter. It's terrible. But with Livers out, I don't really like how we look. He's a pretty big part of our team.
Yeah.
So, I mean, from like a senior perspective and defensively and a captain and like from that aspect. But
where do you think
who
that
knows?
puts Michigan at? Do you think they still have a chance to take?
I think they still have a chance. Yeah, I follow a couple guys on Twitter who tweeted some like statistical things, kind of looking at what the bench would need to do in order to even make it work without Livers and whatnot. And we still have a pretty decent chance. Not a huge swing with like Brandon Johns coming in and a couple of those other guys. So
yeah,
we should be all right.
So, and then obviously for me, I'm a Michigan State fan. I'm just happy the streak lives. The streak remains. Mm-hmm. We can say that now, unfortunately we can't say 24 straight years because it was canceled last year, but 23rd consecutive tournament appearance. We were talking before I started recording, and obviously a lot of Michigan State fans were very angry, very upset about the fact that we got put into a play-in game. I'm kind of 50-50. I'm just grateful they made it. The crazy thing is if you stop and think about it, they had to win all three. I mean, this shows that the committee said, hey, if you didn't win one of those top 5 games, you probably weren't in, which is kind of crazy that's how fine the line was for them. But hey, don't get blown out by Rutgers by 30 and Minnesota by 30. I mean, don't lose to Northwestern. So I'm not complaining as a State fan. The only thing that does kind of irk me is when you look at a team like Syracuse, who, even though they have I think 2 more wins than Michigan State.
They're 16. They're 16 and 11.
I think they're 7. I think they have 17 because Michigan 17? State has 15 wins. I think they have 17. Okay. It's either 16 or 17. But Michigan State has 5 or 6 quad 1 wins. They have the most quad 1 games of any team in the country. Last I saw, it was 16 or 17 quad 1 games that Michigan State played in. Because you got to remember, they played all their Big Ten games. And at the end of the season, they played 6 or 7 quad 1 games, almost in a row.
Yeah.
At Indiana was quad 1, Michigan twice, Illinois, Ohio State, the Maryland game in the tournament at Maryland. Those were all quad 1 games. So to me, and they ended up winning 5 or 6 total. Syracuse had 1. To me, the only reason the committee picked them to play in the Thursday, and I was talking to Kory about this before we started, but it's all TV ratings. It's all about money, playing 2 high profile programs, because most of the time those playing games are nobody teams that no one wants to watch.
Yeah, nobody watches.
So now you end the night with 2 of the most high profile basketball programs of all time in UCLA and Michigan State. It's all about ratings. It's all about money and ratings. But again, I'm just happy they're in it. So I don't know what's going to, I guess now, before I say anything else, what are your kind of predictions or wishes for the tournament here? I guess first, what are your wishes? What are some things maybe you hope to happen, whether it's in general or maybe for your team?
Yeah, so I think in general, I mean, I have the same wish as everybody else. They get all the games, and I know they just had a problem with 6 officials they had to kick out, but no, wishes to get all the games.
Ted Valentine was one of them.
Yeah. I'm hoping Michigan can make a run. I think we need some people to step up off the bench. I think Shondae Brown's going to have to step in. Brandon Johns is going to have to score. And potentially another one of those guys, one of those young kids off the bench, Zeb Jackson, one of them, going to have to come in and just kind of play lights out for us to even have a chance. So my prediction is Michigan Villanova rematch from a couple years ago. It'll be first 5 seed. I'm going to say Michigan wins it. My actual thought is probably Gonzaga or one of the powerhouse teams like Gonzaga or Illinois may win it. So
you're talking about, you're saying for a national champion pick.
Correct. Yeah. Yeah.
So this is probably, because I've been listening. I got to give Sleepers Media podcast a shout out here. I've been listening like the last couple of weeks. I found Sleepers Media podcast this last week, and if you're listening and you like Michigan State basketball or just college basketball content, they've been putting out some great stuff on YouTube and their Apple podcasts and stuff. But they kind of talked about in one of their episodes recently that their wish was to see all number one seeds make it. Most years you want to see upsets and a lot of Cinderella stories, but this year I do kind of agree with them. I think it'd be really fun to see Gonzaga, Michigan, Illinois, and Baylor, because they're all so good. If they're all healthy, obviously Michigan lost Isaiah Livers, but if they can all stay mostly healthy, that would be a lot of fun to see that Final Four. Because most years I don't want the number ones. Most years you want to see these Cinderella stories, but I don't know who even would you pick out of the Cinderella stories. It'd be cool to see Loyola Chicago with sister. Is it Sister Jean
Sister
or
Mary.
whatever? Or Sister
Yes.
Jean. I think it's Jean.
I think it's Jean. Yeah.
I'd love to see, and obviously Drew Valentine's coaching there now as an assistant. So it'd be kind of fun to see Loyola Chicago make a run. I know some people have said Winthrop would be a fun team to see make a run. Outside of that, I don't know who else I would really care to see, Cinderella story. Haven't seen any big, topics of discussion coming out just yet in terms of headlines and some of these, lower seeded teams that this is the big story. So-and-so's, dad is in the hospital and he's going to make all these shots, those kinds of crazy stories about Cinderella.
What was crazy to me is when I go through, I look at all the records and you're looking at teams in the tournament that are 10-6, 12.
Georgetown is 12-10, and they had a losing record till they won their tournament. I mean, you have Oregon State and Georgetown, who both were not going to make the NCAA tournament. They made a crazy 3-4 game run at the end of the year just to win their tournament and their conference tournament and get in. Those I think are also some reasons why Michigan State got kicked down to the play-in game, because you had at least 3 or 4 bid stealers. So, I mean, I don't know. Yeah, it'll be interesting to see. Personally, I would love to see all 4 of these number one seeds make it. Obviously, I'm always all about upsets too, but I just think the power conferences this year, especially in a year where so many non-conference games got canceled, I think some of these lower seeded teams are just going to get blown out. I don't think they've been tested and faced adversity. Like some of these teams who've gone through gauntlets in the Big 12. The Big 12 is unbelievable. The Big 10 is unbelievable. Even the SEC and the ACC, ACC is a little down this year.
Yeah, they're down. That's weird.
But Big 12, SEC, Big 10, all playing strong. So I'll be fascinated to see, how many of these power conference teams avoid upsets and make it all the way. But for me, a wish would be, I'd love to see Michigan State make it through the first weekend. I don't know if they can win 3 games in 5 days. That's never happened before for Michigan State. VCU, I think, was the first team to go from the first 4 to a Final Four. I don't know if they were the last team to do it. They were the first team to do it. They played in a playing game and made it to the Final Four. One of the first years the playing game started, 7 or 8 years ago, but when Shaka Smart was still there. But I don't know if anyone's done it since. But I don't think this Michigan State team has the consistency to make a Final Four, but I think they could get hot enough to make it through the first weekend. I think they could see a streak of 3 games in 5 days and maybe make it to a Sweet 16. But realistically, I think maybe they find a way to beat UCLA and get beat by BYU. If they don't get beat by BYU, Texas would probably beat them in the round of 32, because Texas is very, very good. I think that's who they would have to play.
They've got a good big in Texas too.
And I think that's who they would have to play, is Texas. Anyway, any other thoughts, predictions, wishes, or anything on the tournament? Otherwise, we can move on to the main topic of discussion here.
Set up as many TVs as you have in your house and just watch some basketball. Yeah. That's what I'm ready for.
I'm excited. Yep.
Cold
excited.
Beer in hand.
Multiple screens and some drinks. You already got your cold drink in hand there. I just got some water.
I'm a whiskey man.
Kory's got his Tuesday night beverage. Whiskey on the rocks. All right, so we'll move on here. Obviously, we're a film podcast over here, so we're not going to talk too much basketball, even though I love talking about basketball. So a couple introductory questions before we get to the main topic of discussion. We're going to talk about a Netflix miniseries tonight that just recently won some Golden Globe Awards that Kory and I both watched, in The Queen's Gambit. But first, for you, Kory, in quarantine and the COVID pandemic, these are a couple questions I've asked every guest I've had on. What's your movie going experience been like? Obviously, I've talked about in a couple episodes of my podcast here that I don't remember if I mentioned you by name. I'm pretty sure I did, but that one of my favorite movie going experiences of the last year is Kory and I back in August took a road trip. Theaters were closed in Michigan. You couldn't go see any movies in Michigan, and Tenet opened up in movie theaters around the world in August where they were open. And we actually just had to go an hour and a half south over the border into Indiana to go see a movie. We went to NCG in August, drove an hour and a half down 69 South to go see Tenet. So that was a fun movie going experience, going on the road to try and go see that movie. How about since then? Have you been back to a movie theater since then?
So I have not. That was actually the first and the last time I've been in a year, which it was a great experience. Like you said, we stopped, got really good food, had a couple craft beers, drove down to the movie, and then had a beer in the parking lot, which kind of threw some people for a loop. But hey, it was great.
Yeah, some people came up to us and were like, "Hey, I've never thought about that, having a beer in the parking lot before you go in." We're like, "Yeah, no bars were open, so we just wanted to have one more drink before we go watch the movie."
Yeah. But no, other than that, haven't watched a whole lot of movies. I was watching a ton during the winter. That's kind of when I started my whole, hey, give me a movie. No preface, just give me the movie now. But other than that, nothing new. I have been watching the new Last Chance U on Netflix. That's really all I've been watching. It's getting warm out, so it's golf season.
Golf season. Kory's a golf guy, so he's not going to sit behind a screen except for maybe sports. He's got to get out and play some golf. Do you see yourself going to movie theater anytime soon? Trying to get back to it?
I think if something good comes out, I mean, everything's been so up in the air with what's coming out, when it's going to come out. Did it get pushed back? Mm-hmm. I mean, is it going to all that kind of stuff? So hard to follow.
All the tentpole films, all the blockbusters were all pushed from last year, and a lot of the ones that are supposed to come out this year got pushed to next year because they need to make room for last year's films getting pushed to this year. So create a domino effect. And I actually, off the top of my head, I can't even think of what is like the next big film. I know there's one on the tip of my tongue. There's a new film that's coming out.
King Kong comes out soon, right?
King Kong, yep, is King Kong versus Godzilla is coming out very soon. But the thing is, and I've talked about this with all my guests, I actually recently started HBO Max. All the Warner Brothers films, they're partnered with HBO. They're releasing all of their films simultaneously, in theaters and on HBO Max. So for me, especially with kid number 2, days a week away here, it's not, and my favorite go-to movie theaters, because I moved in the fall, is more than 20 minutes away. It's just not ideal for me to get to the movie theaters often. Caroline and I have gone seen movies twice this year. Went to NCG twice, once in January and again 4 weeks ago. And most of the movies that are coming out right now are small films, which is cool. I mean, some of these films that I've been, seeing released in theaters, or even that Caroline and I went and saw, most years probably wouldn't make a major, cinema chain, or would get buried in the wash of all the blockbusters and major studio releases. And so I think that's kind of cool. You're seeing more foreign films and independent films getting kind of the spotlight. And actually, with the Oscar nominations being released yesterday, I'm going to talk with a different guest later this week about how you're seeing some very unique films get nominated, because so many of the typical films you might get to see nominated weren't released, or they got pushed. So, so you just said you haven't watched a lot of movies or TV shows, but from what you did watch over the last year, did you have kind of a go-to streaming service, or, what did you find yourself gravitating towards the most in terms of, hey, I turn on my TV, I'm going to watch a movie or TV show. What's got the best selection? What are you picking? What are you going to?
Yeah, so I would say my go-to is Netflix for sure. Amazon Prime's right behind it. We do have Apple TV currently through one of those random
They
promotions.
keep getting more and more stuff. Apple TV Plus doesn't have a lot. But I keep telling people some of my favorite movies that I've seen from 2020 release that are going to be high on I haven't put out my 2020 list just yet. I'm working through a few more films on my watch list, but some films are going to be very, very high on my 2020 watch list. We're on Apple TV Plus.
The one you recommended to me was that animated one, and I'm not going to remember the name of it.
Wolfwalkers.
Yeah,
my favorite.
Very good.
I watched it twice. It's like my favorite film of the year. I absolutely loved it. It just got the Oscars nominated for Best Animated Feature, so it was nominated for an Oscar. I would love for it to win, but knowing Disney Pixar, it probably won't, because Disney Pixar got 2 films on the list with Soul and Onward.
Soul was good though. I have not seen Onward.
I wouldn't be upset about Soul. Onward's very, very average, very mid, but. No. Anyway, so you're a big Netflix guy. Do you think you might try HBO Max? That was something I just actually paid. They allow you to pay 6 months in advance for like $15 off. So I have it for the next 6 months. I just figured I'm going to get my money's worth with how many movies are going to be coming out. I already watched Judas and the Black Messiah on it twice because that got a exclusive HBO Max release streaming service simultaneously. I'm getting ready to watch the Zack Snyder's re-release of Justice League, King Kong versus Godzilla. I mean, you got all these good movies that are going to be coming out on HBO Max because of Warner Brothers has so much content. But so what do you think about that? Any thoughts?
I mean, if they're going to start releasing stuff like that, I would probably invest in it.
Well, and what's nice, Disney Plus is trying to, they're trying to release films on their streaming service too, but they make you pay that $30 premiere access, which to me makes sense if you're like a family of 3, 4, 5, then that it's worth it, because if you go to the theater, it's going to cost you that or more on top of buying, paying for gas, buying for food and drinks. So it makes sense if you're with a big group, but by like just me, I'm not paying $30 to watch Raya, the Dragon Emperor, or whatever it's called, the new movie that just came out that actually it's supposed to be really good with Awkwafina voices the main character. I really want to watch it, but I'm not paying $30 for it when it's going to go to their regular streaming service in the summer. HBO Max isn't doing that. It's free to all subscribers, any new movies.
So that's enticing for a normal, like an average movie watcher like myself. I mean, for you watch everything, so it kind of makes sense. But for the average person, if I can see 3 or 4 movies that I wanted to see for the year for additional like $10 a month, I mean, it may be worth it. It may not be worth it. I don't know. I'll have to dive into kind of what they're releasing.
Dude, and I'm going to keep telling everyone, man, I wish I should get HBO Max to sponsor this podcast, but I'm going to praise, dude, I'm going to sing their praises. Their library, their content is tremendous. They have such an incredible selection. Obviously, all their HBO original TV series. I mean, they have some of the greatest TV shows of all time, but even on top of that, I can't believe I was scrolling through all their movies. I can't believe they have maybe one of the best selection of old classic films that I've seen on a streaming service. Netflix keeps losing all of their old classic titles because most of these new streaming services own the rights to them, and when the streaming rights expire with Netflix, they're taking back their original properties. I don't know how HBO Max got some of the things they have. They have a huge selection of foreign films, old classic foreign films. It's kind of like a cinephile like myself who is obsessed with movies. It's like a must have, but even like a casual viewer, I mean, there's so many good TV shows. And then with all the new movies coming out, I mean, I think HBO Max has a little bit of everything for everybody. I think it's great. I mean, I still enjoy Netflix, and like you said, I like Amazon Prime. Disney Plus, is solid for, a few things, but HBO Max to me it's gotta be the best one. But anyway,
I just bummed the Disney Plus off my mom, so it's fine.
we bumming off of my mother-in-law. She paid for it when she's watching her grandson, our son, so she's watching Calvin. Anyway, any parting thoughts, anything we've kind of just talked about there? Otherwise, we can get into the Queen's Gambit here.
Let's talk about her. Let's get into it.
So we're going to chat about a miniseries that came out on Netflix at the end of October called The Queen's Gambit. Obviously, it came out a little while ago. I have not had a chance to really talk about it, and I've been wanting to talk about it. And even though it came out a while ago, I actually did not get around to watching it until I think it was early February. I finished it about a month ago with my wife. But it's kind of relevant again because it just won 2 Golden Globes. So the Golden Globes happened last week or a week and a half ago, and it was up for 2, and it won both of them. But before we start to talk about the Queen's Gambit here, a series that Kory's also watched, I did learn of a nice, fun little trivia fact before I started recording regarding chess. So the Queen's Gambit is pretty heavily focused on the game of chess in the chess world. Kory's wife, Maddie, who's also a very good friend of mine, apparently was in chess club. And I did not know this. Kory, can you please tell the people about how your wife was in chess club?
I'm going to hype this up as much as
new to me.
So I'm sitting at the kitchen table tonight, and we were talking about how I was going to be on here. And I was like, yeah, it's a good show. And Maddie was like, yeah, it was really interesting to me. And I was like, yeah, you used to play chess with your dad, didn't you? She's like, oh, no, I was in chess club for 3 years. And I'm like, what? It blew my mind. It was fantastic. So
wait, so 3 years in high school. So she was in chess club for 3 years in high school?
No, not in high school. Maddie went to a private school, like a Montessori school through elementary, I believe she came to Grand Ledge in 4th grade.
Okay,
so
I didn't know that.
If you don't know anything about Montessori school, Montessori? Yeah,
Monastery?
School.
That was monastery. Monastery with a T? I don't know. Whatever.
Maybe.
I know what you're talking about.
Anyway, yes. She learned how to add on an abacus. She learned how to do basic math skills on an abacus. So it was you called your teachers by their first name. So it's very out there. It's very like open world learning, like everybody, like kumbaya. So
but it has like a very a lot of traditional formal aspects to it too, doesn't it?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know a whole lot about it other than she was in chess club, and she called her teacher Claude by his first name. So that's the 2 greatest things I've heard in like the last probably month that she's told me, and we've been together 11 years. So
I've never heard this either. I've known Maddie longer than you've been dating her. I've never heard this story.
Yeah, so she was in chess club. We've never played chess. I will be investing in a chess set, and we will be playing. I'll let everybody know how it goes.
So I guess this is an interesting way to start our conversation on the Queen's Gambit. You've never played chess? You don't know how to play chess?
No, I know how to play. I've played.
Oh, you know how to play?
Yeah, when I was little.
Okay.
But I haven't played in probably, I don't even know how old am I, 30 almost, probably 20 years.
So I'm actually kind of right there with you too. My dad loves chess. My dad taught my brother and I when we were kids. When we were really little, we had a chessboard at our house. Actually, we got so into it. My dad really got my brother and I into it that my mom, my brother and I, for my dad one year, for a Christmas gift, bought him this like massive, it was like a standalone table that had a built-in chessboard on the top that you can flip over to do chess, checkers, backgammon, and then it came with like leather chairs. So like it was a table that was just meant for playing chess on. And my brother and my dad and I would do like little tournaments, and we would play like throughout the month. Like we would make a move and then walk away, and then we would have like a little card that said whose move it was, and you come back and make another move. And we'd always have to make sure someone wasn't cheating. So I learned chess as well when I was little, but like you, I haven't played it probably since high school, maybe before high school. I don't think I've played it probably since I was 12 or 13 years old. It's been a long time. Maybe 14 or 15 would be the most recent. So almost 15 years ago would have been the last time I played chess as well. So when I was watching the show, obviously there's things I remember. Caroline, if you're listening, Caroline's my wife. She's never played chess, so she didn't really know anything, and I had to kind of explain some of the moves to her. I guess before we get too much into chess, I should introduce what we're going to talk about. Kind of did already. So we're going to be talking about the Queen's Gambit here. Netflix miniseries came out at the end of October of last year. If you haven't seen it, we're going to be talking spoilers. So make sure if you don't want something ruined for the Queen's Gambit, please make sure you watch it before you listen, unless you don't care to have it. If you don't mind that it's being ruined, then whatever, then listen ahead. So anyway, the Queen's Gambit is based on a book that came out in 1983. And the title refers to a chess opening. The Queen's Gambit is the name of an opening move in chess. So the mini-series was written and directed by Scott Frank. And the story takes place in the 1950s and then in the 1960s. And it follows this female character named Beth Harmon. It's kind of a coming of age story because the entire show kind of, there's many points in the show where it has flashbacks to when she's very little. But the show pretty much starts with her being orphaned, and being taken into kind of basically being a ward of the state and being taken into an orphanage because her dad is no longer in the picture, and her mom, basically, you find out later, has committed suicide. You're not really sure of that at first, and then you kind of find that out later through flashbacks. And basically, once she goes to the orphanage through a custodial staff member, a janitor who's working there, who is in love with chess, and he plays chess in the basement by himself. Beth Harmon becomes interested in chess, and he teaches her how to play. And basically, the entire show catalogs and kind of follows her rise in chess stardom, worldwide, international fame, basically a chess prodigy. I don't even think she barely passes 21 or 22 years old by the time the thing is over. This miniseries, it's only 7 episodes. I mean, when she starts, she's like 15 years old. And then at the end, in kind of the climactic big chess match that she wins against the world number 1 at the end, she's only like 21. So it basically kind of follows about a 7-8 year stretch in her life. And throughout the 7 episodes, man, I mean, this show's great. I know Kory and I, before we started, he was talking about how much he enjoyed it. And like I mentioned, it through the awards season here, obviously the Academy Awards does not honor television shows or miniseries, but at all the awards that do, it's won quite a few. It won 2 at the Golden Globe Awards. It won some Critics' Choice Awards. It won Screen Actors Guild Awards. So it's been doing pretty well. So Kory, what did you, before we kind of get into some talking points here on the Queen's Gambit, what did you think about the show overall? I think you had mentioned that you really enjoyed it.
It was underratedly intense for chess. It was actually kind of crazy. We watched the first episode, and I'll be honest, I fell asleep. And then we started the second episode the next night, and I got into it, so I had to go back and watch the first episode. But no, it's an intense story, and it's kind of it follows the traditional like underdog story. So it ties you into that. You're like, oh, this poor girl, she's in an orphanage. Oh, she's being tranquilized, like all this craziness, and then she kind of rises through the ranks and then goes through some hardships. So I thought it was good. It was way too intense for a chess show. It was kind of crazy how intense it was.
And I do agree with you. So it's only 7 episodes, so it's a pretty quick watch. The longest episode, I think the last episode's like 1 hour and 20 minutes. And I think most of them are right around an hour, a little less. So it's essentially like 8 hours, a little less than 8 hours of your time. And other than, I do agree with you, the first episode, the introduction, kind of the setup, the premise, kind of, introducing the characters and the setup for the story, does drag a little bit. But I feel like the pacing after that first episode, it's really hard to stop. If you get through that first episode and you enjoyed enough where you're like, oh, I'll watch episode 2, I promise, it's going to soar. It's going to fly from there. Because you're right. And speaking of, for a show that's very intense for chess is like never the center of conversation in terms of popular movies or TV shows. I off the top of my head, I think I Googled it at one point. I can't even think of a popular or famous film or television show about chess. I think I Googled it at one point, but off the top of my head, I couldn't think of any. There's really not, especially when the protagonist is a woman, right? A young woman. So that's been one of the biggest topics of conversation. Now, this is based on a book. I think I mentioned that when I introduced it, that came out in 1983. So I don't know. I haven't read the book, obviously. I don't know if I ever will. I don't read like I used to, unfortunately, but the author of the book, if you're interested, is Walter Tevis, Tevis. So I don't know if there was a reason. I haven't had a chance to look into it as to why he decided to choose a young woman for the protagonist of his story, without going into it and trying to look it up. But I think it's very interesting that he did that, and I've seen a lot of people praise it in that regard, that he decided to choose a young woman in a game that is so predominantly men, and that's definitely a big topic of discussion and a theme that's heavy throughout the miniseries, is how she is in this world of men. And there were some, Kory and I were talking a little bit before I was, I was kind of exploring some information because it's been a little while since I watched the show. I was trying to refresh my memory on it. And there's been some think pieces written about this, how critical kind of to a point, how they almost wish that they would have gone farther in exploring some of the more sexist, the sexism that's present in the sport, in the world of chess. But there were some people who praised it, for not hanging on that, not making that like the focus of the show. Really the focus of the show, even though chess is, definitely center of the plot and the main driving force in the show. Really, I would say the focus, it's more of a character study, right? And that idea of, Kory and I were chatting a little bit about before I started recording, but that idea of crazy, are you a genius or are you crazy, right? A very famous celebrity right now that always is thrown around with is Kanye West, right? Is he a genius or is he crazy? So that's kind of and do you have to be a little bit of both? It's always that fine line where people are like, okay, if you're a genius, do you have to be a little bit of crazy? And so this Beth Harmon, the character that's explored in this show, she's a prodigy, but she deals with a lot of problems. She's dealt with a lot of trauma. As you watch the show, they kind of show you a lot of flashbacks and, the things she's dealt with as a child in terms of her parents, her mom basically ostracizing her dad and basically forcing her dad out of their life, even though he didn't want to be forced out. She forced him out. And then her mom has these serious breakdowns and ends up, later on committing suicide. And that's kind of where the show picks up, is with her being orphaned, Beth Harmon, her character. But I do think it's fascinating that, they choose this time period, they choose this sport, they choose this protagonist. It's a very unique story in that regard. It has so many elements, so many things going for it all at once that you don't see a lot in movies or TV shows. And then on top of it, it's incredibly well made. So I'm sorry, I know I was kind of babbling a little bit going on, but
you're good.
I was trying to look up.
I completely agree. I mean, the 100 themes in the movie really goes a different direction. With it being in the 50s and 60s, you think it would literally be geared towards like just crazy sexism towards her and whatnot, but they really don't take that road. They do a really good job of explaining her story and explaining her struggles and the respect that she actually had from a lot of the people she was playing chess against, being as good as she was. And then from there, I mean, there's a million other things with her adoption mother and all that. Personally, when the adoption mother came into the picture and she was really good at chess, sorry, cat.
Oh, cat in the podcast.
I told you, first cat in the podcast. But I really thought when her mom came in, or her adopted mother came into the picture, I was like, oh, this is going to go sideways. Like her adopted mother's going to be money hungry and all this craziness. And it ended up like they were like best friends, which was super cool to me. So,
well, and that was the other thing that I saw some people mention about this show. And I think because I was trying to pinpoint what I liked about it so much as well. And this kind of really was like an aha thing that I read. I was like, that's why the show is so great. They constantly, pull the rug out from under you in terms of, your expectations. You're constantly expecting one thing and then they kind of flip it on its head. Like you just said, you expect, when she gets adopted, you're like, oh man, this is going to go sideways. And then they can take a completely different approach. They every narrative turn, every like significant moment in the show with her character, you think one thing's going to happen and then the opposite or something you didn't expect happens. First you expect something sinister is going to happen with the janitor, and then he ends up being her friend and being like, by the end of the show, retrospectively for her character, she's so upset when she realizes she kind of took him for granted. He passed during the show after she becomes famous. Before she becomes famous, remember, she writes the janitor for money to enter into a tournament and promises that she's going to pay him back. And then she never does. And she kind of forgets about him till she hears that he's died. And then she goes to his funeral and she is like basically hysterical and beside herself when she realizes that she goes down into his office and he has all these pictures of her and all the articles that he's cut out of her like rise to success and her fame. So she like realizes how proud he was of her. And she like realizes, man, this guy could have been like a friend or even a father figure. And I kind of screwed that up and took it for granted. So between that and then, like you said, with the adoptive mother, you think something bad's going to happen with her or the adoptive father. But that ends up turning out completely different than I anticipated. My wife, if you're listening, my wife's name is Caroline. Her and I were watching the show, kept speculating what was going to happen as we were watching with the adoptive mother. I kept thinking she was going to take advantage of her. And at first you're like, oh man, she's using her for the money. But by the end of their relationship, her adoptive mother, unfortunately, dies. She has a heart attack, I think she has a heart.
She was sick for a while. She
was very unhealthy from drinking,
show,
and she's drinking and smoking and not taking good care of herself. And I think she has a heart attack when they're in, I think, Mexico City at one of the tournaments. But at that point, even right before her adoptive mother dies, I kept thinking, okay, at what point is this going to go sideways? At what point is one of them going to blow up at the other? But like by the end, you kind of look at it, it's like, well, they both were using each other, but at least they were happy, right? She's using her adoptive daughter in a sense to kind of explore this life of travel and drinking and relaxing. But at the same time, she goes to her chess matches. She tries to learn it. And she basically is like a manager for her. And then Beth kind of uses her adoptive mother in on the flip side to, she pays for all of this. She organizes it. She calls the hotels. She sets everything up, basically acts like a manager for her. So that's kind of a really cool relationship that gets explored. And it's very, very sad when that character dies. The crazy thing is the woman who played the actress, I didn't realize she's a director. She directed It's a Beautiful Day in the Neighborhood, the film that just came out with Tom Hanks.
That's a great movie too.
That woman was the director of that film. I didn't realize that she like acts here and there, but she's mostly a director. She was great. She was really, really good. Another thing that kind of twist your expectations. Well, I was going to say the ending, but not so much the ending, but the journey there. I think they really play around with your expectations a lot. You keep thinking, that a certain moment's going to be successful for, and there are some predictable moments in terms of, where she falters. The show heavily explores substance abuse, drugs and alcohol. Beth Harmon's character abuses both quite consistently throughout the show. So, there's some predictability with that. You're like, okay, you could see this coming, with her problems in terms of there's a tournament she enters in Paris where she completely screws it up against the number one chess player in the world, this Russian nationalist, this guy who's like super intimidating, and she screws it all up because she stays up late partying and drinking. But I would say one other aspect that's kind of unpredictable is we already mentioned that the show plays around with the traditional roles and in terms of male versus female in the world of chess, or a world of a sporting world that's dominated by men. They kind of flip that on its head, right? And by the end, all of the men that she's encountered along the way end up like rooting for and helping her. They, all those guys who are back in New York are sitting there like playing, like staying up all night, making all the chess moves, call her and like practice with her and work with her on the phone. So I really like that too. It's again, some people were a little critical of it, like you should have explored more of the sexism, but at the same time, isn't it kind of nice to see some of that, that positivity with the themes and some of those elements of the show that they could have taken a much darker, more serious route. And the show is not sparse on dark and serious moments. There are definitely dark and serious moments. I mean, her mom commits suicide. I mean, there's a lot of very serious, and her adoptive mom has a heart attack and she finds her. I mean, there's a lot of dark and serious moments as it is already. So it's nice that they, there are some uplifting scenes like that in the film, but
it was almost refreshing. Like they could have easily taken the road of like, oh, she's in this male dominated sport. Oh yeah, she gets hit on. Oh, like these creepy old 50, 60-year-old men from Russia, like get too handsy with her. Like they literally could have gone that way without any problems and you wouldn't even have thought anything of it. But it was kind of refreshing. Like it was more geared towards her success, her story. I mean, there was some like risque business in there throughout, but I mean, it wasn't anything like far-fetched. You're just like, yeah, no. I mean, that's, yeah.
Well, like you said, they could have gone that route, and I think people wouldn't have blinked twice at it because, again, with the time period, the 50s and 60s and even into the 70s, and in a a game like chess that's male dominated, and she's going around the world. Anyone could have bought, some of the mistreatment that would have come her way. And while she wasn't like, there wasn't anything overt like abuse or anything like that, she was looked down upon or not taken seriously, until the first few episodes when she first starts playing those twins. I love the twins at the Kentucky high school kind of scoff, and then by the end they're two of her biggest allies by the end of the show.
Yeah.
But I think for anyone it would be hard to take in her first tournament. How old is she? She's like 12 or 13. So I mean,
Yeah.
a boy or a girl, if you're that young, I mean, if you're not well known yet, it's going to be hard no matter your sex, how your gender.
And it was like the state tournament too. I mean, it wasn't like
the state tournament.
the state tournament that she won. So it was pretty cool.
So speaking of locations too in the show, I thought it was very interesting when I was, doing some reading on the show. Do you know where the show was filmed? It was filmed in 2 countries only, and they weren't the United States. None of it
was actually Mexico City.
No, none of it was filmed in the US. It wasn't filmed in Mexico. So pretty much all of the scenes you saw that were in Kentucky and most of the places in outside and like suburban United States was filmed in Ontario in Canada, Toronto, which is very common. There's a huge tax break to film in Canada that a lot of Toronto is a very popular city for a lot of Hollywood movies and TV shows to film in. But the majority of the film that takes place in other countries was filmed in Berlin, which was really surprising. Everything from Russia, everything from France, everything from Mexico, even the scenes in Las Vegas. Apparently the scenes in Las Vegas were filmed in Berlin. So I thought
that's kind of cool.
Whoever did the production design of the show and the scouting obviously did a very good job of finding. Apparently that was the whole point of going to Berlin, is Berlin has a lot of buildings, interior and exterior, that can represent many different places all over the world. So I never would have known any different. So I thought that was really interesting, that's where they filmed it. I also looked it up because I was curious when I was watching the show if they had consultants. They did. They have a grand master. They had a world champion and a grand master who were consultants throughout the entire production of this show. And apparently I think both of them, at least one of them, maybe both of them, worked with the author 37 years ago when the book came out. Another crazy tidbit, the chess world loved this show for its realism and accurate portrayal of the games. And if you're really into chess and you're like, wow, these look great, most of the major chess sequences were taken from real life chess games, like famous, popular like tournaments and like really famous championship chess matches. They actually used real life, like every single move, like down to the opening move to the final move. They used from actual chess matches. So if you're wondering, if you're a chess, whether you are familiar or you aren't familiar with chess, in terms of the dedication to the game of chess, they were very dedicated to making it look real. And like you mentioned earlier, it was amazing how quickly they make the show go by just with the game of chess. You know what I mean? Because could you imagine just like a camera, like sitting there and watching a live chess match? I mean, unless you're really, really into chess, would you really enjoy watching an entire game of chess from start to finish?
I didn't know that there was moves. Like I knew there was moves in chess, but I didn't know there was it's like practically plays. If you're gonna, I'm football guy, I'm related to football. There's like literal plays, and I guess I just never knew that. And so when I'm watching the show, I'm like, holy shit! Like they're literally like setting. And granted, she had some other things going on that we'll talk about, but she was like setting up different plays down the road and was taking them from books and research and all this and practicing them. It was super cool to see. I had no idea that was even a thing.
I was aware of it on a surface level. I didn't know the extent of it. I was aware that the Queen's Gambit was the name of an opening chess move, and I was aware that there was like names for certain moves in terms of like different opening moves have names, in terms of different strategies, like sacrificing your queen. There's different moves and strategies, but there's literally like hundreds and hundreds and hundreds. Like I didn't realize there was
Yeah.
that many. And then something Caroline wasn't familiar with that I was familiar with, but I don't have it memorized or know it. But each square has a name. So most of them,
Oh, wow.
knight to
Yeah.
B4, whatever, things like that. So like,
Yeah.
those people who are that good at chess, it's crazy the strategy and the amount of game planning and practicing that can go into it. One of my favorite scenes, again, I already mentioned it, but with all the male players that she has beaten by the time the final episode rolls around, all the male players that are her friends back in New York and call to help her strategize against the Russian #1 player, were all men that she beat, and they came, they respected her, and they're her friends. They spend time together. And I love how they're strategizing in the apartment. They have all these books, and they have multiple chessboards, and they're coming up with all the different moves and stuff. And and speaking of those guys, how great! Oh man, what's his name? Harry Melling, the guy who played Dudley in Harry Potter.
Yeah, didn't age, which is crazy.
He just lost all the weight. Harry Melling, Harry Melling, dude. Yeah. He was also in The Devil All the Time. I think, didn't I tell you to watch that movie last year? It came out on Netflix.
I don't remember that one.
So there was a Netflix film that came out last year called The Devil All the Time. He was in that movie. So he was in that movie. He was in this miniseries. He was in a Coen Brothers film a few years ago too. He's been doing a lot of great stuff, but he was really good in the show. The guy who played Benny, who that Benny guy cracked me up, dude. What was the actor's name? Thomas Brody Sangster, and I've seen him in some other things. I wasn't as familiar with him, but Benny Watts' character I thought was really funny and interesting. The guy who played Towns, obviously, is a very interesting character. And I thought that was interesting too, that they kind of explored the LGBT community in a way too with this series, because it's kind of hinted at that Towns, I think, is gay. They never come out and say it.
And he's hiding it, which you would do in the 50s and 60s.
Yeah, they never come out and say it, which again, I guess would be reflective of the times. And then it's like hinted at that Anya Taylor-Joy's character, Beth Harmon. It's hinted at that she, I think, is bisexual. But that was some other interesting aspects of the film. On top of all the things they explore sexuality too, in an interesting and subtle way. That it's not overt and it's not like in your face or anything. But it's crazy how much different, how many different things that they're able to explore in the show. The self-destructive nature of trying to be successful. People like this. You get on such a high pedestal. I mean, you see this with celebrities in real life. People become so successful, they fall so quickly and so easily. Kory and I were just talking before this started about whether we should discuss The Last Dance, that came out last year, a recent Netflix miniseries documentary. Obviously, it was on ESPN as well, with Michael Jordan, but he's a great example of a real life sports figure who was on such a high pedestal, and then the gambling thing, going to baseball, even though he still looked on favorably. I'm just using as a real life example of someone who's even now still beloved and people still talk about and have a lot of respect for, but how quickly and how easily something can bring you down, whether it's something you do on purpose or not. So this show kind of explores that in sports as well, that this is an individual who has had a lot of trauma, a lot of problems. She tries to numb that and mask it in drugs and alcohol. And even though she's a genius, often that gets in the way. And it also explores the attitude of trying to do everything on your own, and it's okay to ask for help. A lot of the guys at the end of the show who are friends are like, the Russians help each other. That's the reason they're so good. They strategize together, and she doesn't realize it until she goes to Paris and sees the Russians strategize. She's like, okay, maybe I should finally ask for help. So being okay to ask for help, to seek out help, even when you're that good. So it is crazy the different themes that the show kind of, travels through as it goes along. But yeah, it's great. I really enjoy it a lot. The music is great. There's a lot of great cinematography, a lot of great with the chess sequences. I think
the cinematography was underrated in the show.
I think that's one of the reasons it is so fast paced and so visually interesting, is because you can't just film, you could film a chess scene just straight ahead, just let it play, but how boring would that be? right?
Yeah.
So they do interesting things with the chess sequences with the camera, and with the editing. There's some very interesting editing with the chess sequences. They go around, they focus on people in the crowd, they focus on different moves, they focus on the characters' faces, and that's a credit also to the performances. You have to be a good actor to sit there playing a game of chess and make it compelling to watch somebody's face during a game of chess. So, and again, I think the show does go by quickly, and it is very fun. It's energetic. It's fast paced because it's a combination of things. There's a lot of, there's a team of people who are making the show so great. And you got to credit Netflix for giving money to produce something like this. I mean, it is such a weird concept. If you just read on paper, not a weird concept, but like it sounds boring. You know what I mean? If you read on
Hey,
paper,
I've got a pitch about a movie about a psycho brilliant woman who's actually addicted to drugs and alcohol.
see, but you're making it sound interesting. You're making it sound interesting. I'm saying like if you pitch it,
she's really
if you
good at chess, and you'd be like,
no, yeah, but if you pitched it like this, if you pitched it how it's like written online, coming of age drama in the period piece in the 1950s and 60s of an orphan becoming a chess prodigy, you're like, all right. But then, yeah, you get, again, you know what I'm saying? But then you get into the things that we're talking about here, and all of these individual pieces just add up to such a great miniseries. I wouldn't say it's perfect. I think at times it does become like her character becomes a bit of a parody, and I think that's not the show's fault. I think when you have a character like this that's supposed to be playing the genius, the prodigy, it's really hard to make that realistic, because how many prodigies or geniuses do you know? I don't. I mean, I could probably sit down and tell you someone who I think is really, really smart, but a true genius, a true child prodigy, I've never met anyone like that in my life. I've met people who are very, very smart. So in that sense, it is kind of hard to make that character grounded and not seem a little hyperbolic or a little bit extreme, with some of her characteristics. So at times it does get a little silly, and a little predictable in terms of her drug and alcohol abuse. And then like some of the things she does in terms of her genius and her prodigy elements. That would be like really some of my only criticisms of the show. Another criticism I've seen is a lot of people said the black character, oh shoot, what's her name? Because she's a great character, but she's very underutilized.
Jolene.
A lot of people argued that her character was not explored well enough and was really just there as like a token black person to be used to like just help her later on, whereas like their relationship and her character maybe could have been explored a little bit more outside of her, and I don't think the show was cheap and ever like made it obvious that she was just there to be a token, person of color or anything like that.
No, she was there in a time of need, and
yeah,
I mean, it kind of followed the whole storyline. To go back to kind of what you just said, I believe it was like episode 5 when she got really in her lows and she was living in the house.
Yeah, that sounds right. I think it was episode 5 around that.
Almost got a little bit like too long for me. It was like, all right, I get it. Like, she's in the dumps, but like, let's keep moving here.
But they do, and yeah, so that would be another criticism is that seemed like a very predictable moment. As many times as the show does subvert your expectations, there's many moments that I already mentioned. That is a sequence that's a little predictable. Like going into the show and you start to see that she's a substance abuser, you're like, okay, at some point she's going to fall into a stupor. She's going to become, she's going to go on a binge, and, someone is going to come in and pull her out of it. I didn't expect it to be Jolene. I thought Jolene was going to be a one-off character. So I will say in that regard, it was nice that she came back, because I thought she was an interesting character that was underutilized. But I will also say when she came back, she was kind of a one-note character again. They didn't really use her much except for, kind of a deus ex machina, like this just savior out of nowhere, just comes back into the story to help her out of her slump.
A random black friend who comes and gives her a bunch of money, and then
and advice and helps her out, and then she disappears again. So that would be one of my only, I'm nitpicking here. I'm just trying to come up with things I would, criticize the show for. And, I wouldn't say it's perfect. I think this is a damn near perfect. I think in terms of what the show is going for, I think it's about as good as it can possibly be for what it is. That would be my only complaint, is maybe a few nitpicks with the writing here and there. But again, it's a damn good miniseries. And I think
The miniseries are refreshing. I mean, it's nice to get something that's 7 episodes. It's like a super long movie. You get to watch it, and then the story's over. I mean, sometimes you get into these shows, and it's like season 87, and you're like, dude, what in the heck? The main characters died 6 times. I got this random guy playing a zombie. Like, no, it wasn't that. It's 7 episodes, very solid. You know what I mean? You can watch it and enjoy it, and there's an end. I hate when it just keeps going forever.
Oh yeah, and that's a whole other conversation we can get into. But that's what I always tell people. I don't watch a lot of TV shows because of what you just said. I don't want to invest my time in something that by the time I get to the payoff or the ending, I'm really upset and frustrated. And that was pretty much what kind of happened with Game of Thrones. I still love Game of Thrones, but the ending was a little tough. There's very few shows that I would sit here and say that last for a long time, that from start to finish are perfect or damn near perfect and worth rewatching. There's very few shows I put on that list. So I am with you there, man. I wish more really good miniseries have been made. If you haven't watched on Netflix, they had a miniseries that came out a few years ago called Maniac. That was with Jonah Hill and Emma Stone. That is fantastic. It's like a science fiction drama comedy. It's a really weird, bizarre miniseries that is great. Another miniseries that is killing it right now on Netflix is the horror anthology series called The Haunting of. The Haunting of Hill House, The Haunting of Bly Manor just came out this last year. Hill House came out a few years ago. Mike Flanagan, who's done a lot of horror films, has been putting those 2 shows out, and each season is a contained story, 7 or 8 episodes. So
Chernobyl's another great one.
Chernobyl on HBO Max, that one was only 4 episodes. That was great.
Yeah.
I always tell people True Detective season 1. Caroline and I, my wife Caroline, had never seen True Detective season 1, so we just watched True Detective season 1. Speaking of HBO, reasons to get HBO Max, True Detective season 1 is 8 episodes, and I promise anyone listening right now, if you've never seen True Detective season 1, it is the best 8 episodes of television you will ever see in your life. I'm not exaggerating. 8 episodes of TV, there's not a better 8 episodes of TV. It's a contained story because each season of True Detective focuses on different characters, different time period, different location. So you can just watch season 1. It's with Matthew McConaughey and Woody Harrelson. And it's phenomenal. It's some of the best television I've ever seen. It's only 8 episodes, but yeah, I wish more networks were doing miniseries. I do see more and more starting to do them. And the new popular thing now is anthology series. True Detective is an anthology series. Not Sons of Anarchy. I was thinking FX. On FX, you got American Horror Stories, an anthology series, been on for a while. Fargo on FX. FX is doing all these anthology series. So those are obviously, popular as well to watch a contained story. Because I'm with you, man. It's hard for me to sit down and watch a TV show from start to finish, or even get involved in a new show if I don't think it's going to be good, if I'm just going to be upset with the payoff or it's going to lose me. Walking Dead is a great example, man. I watched the first, I think I watched back when Walking Dead came out when Kory and I were in high school, 2010, 2011. They're on season.
I remember watching it in my dorm on Sundays.
Yeah, dude. Yeah. Every Sunday I watched the first, I think 3 seasons. And I think I started season 4 and I'm like, dude, this is getting dumb. And it's still on. That show still hasn't ended. They're on like 12 people. Most people.
It's still on?
Yes. I don't even know anyone who
watches
it
it anymore.
Apparently people still watch it because it's still going, but
that's crazy.
Yeah. Anyway, so that's a whole different topic, but yeah, Queen's Gambit. It's on Netflix, came out in October. Kory and I really wanted to talk about it. It's a show that we both watched and enjoyed. I just finally watched it about 4 to 6 weeks ago, and this last week it won 2 Golden Globes. It won for Best Miniseries or Television Film, and it also won Best Actress for Anya Taylor-Joy in a miniseries or television film. So yeah, I really enjoyed it. Don't know if I have anything else I want to say that I didn't already say. Yeah, do you have any final thoughts, parting thoughts on Queen's Gambit that we didn't mention?
No, we talked pretty much about everything. I mean, the theme, great themes throughout the whole thing, great story. Like we said, it wasn't really, you couldn't really ever guess what was going to happen. I mean, the minute you started being like, oh, this is going to be like every other movie, it would shift ideas. So that was great. No, it's just a solid watch. I mean, it's 8 nights. It's 2 weeks with your significant other or on your own, and boom, you're done. So
it's basically like cool. I said, it's like watching a 7.5 hour movie.
Yep.
It's like less than 8 hours of your life. And you can split it up over every night of a week. One night, watch 2 episodes. There's more than one night where Caroline and I watched it over 2 weeks, but that's because we couldn't watch it every night in a row. But there's more than one night where I coaxed her into watching 2 episodes because I really got into it. I want to keep watching. But would you watch it again? To me, that's a high praise for a show or a movie. Does it have rewatchability?
I actually would say it does. I think there's a lot of stuff hidden, especially like once she becomes adopted through like when she starts playing chess. I feel like there's a lot of hidden messages in there that I would go back and watch it just to kind of see if I pick up anything. Once she gets rolling, the story's pretty self-explanatory from there.
Well, there's a lot of great visuals too. I would watch it again just even for the visuals, the camera work, the editing, the way it's colored. I recently, a couple episodes ago, had a colorist on the podcast. One of my buddies works as a colorist in Hollywood, Elliot Powell. I had him on a couple episodes ago, and I would love to chat with him about the colors in the show, how the colorist did. But it does have some very distinct, solid, dark colors as well that make the visuals interesting, and the production design, the costumes. I love a good period piece film or TV show that really pays attention to detail like that. It's always fun, that kind of time capsule to another time period to kind of pick those things apart, those details. So
could be why they use Berlin though. I mean, from the architecture and all that, from being over in Germany. I mean, that very well could be. So
I read that apparently a lot of the interiors and exteriors of I've never been to Germany, but a lot of the interiors and exteriors of buildings over there kind of traverse a lot of different time periods as well as different styles of architecture, which made it kind of perfect to kind of showcase all over Europe and into Russia, as well as even those scenes in Mexico and apparently Las Vegas. Some of the indoor scenes were filmed indoors in Berlin, so interesting. But
cool.
Well, all right, that's all I have on the Queen's Gambit. Hopefully if you were listening all the way through and you haven't seen it yet, I'm sorry that we spoiled everything, but I did warn you at the beginning, so I would still recommend checking it out. Hopefully you were listening because you've watched it already and you just wanted to hear a good conversation about a good show. Kory, you mentioned that, so I've let all my guests plug something at the end of the episode. You kind of mentioned you did have something you wanted to plug.
I did. I don't remember.
At the beginning, you said, "Hey, I do have something I want to plug or promote at the end of your episode."
Oh, that was just Maddie being in chess club.
Oh, you were saying that there was something you wanted to promote or plug.
No, nothing to promote. My wife's a nerd, but I love her for it, and that's about it.
All right. Well, if you're interested, Kory is very active on social media, Twitter, posting a lot about sports. So I'll put your socials in the description on YouTube if anyone wants to give Core Dog a follow on Twitter.
Follow me.
Well, Kory, thank you for joining. Thank you for being a guest. We will be back with another episode very soon. This episode will probably be coming out on Wednesday, March 17th. So in time for our little basketball preview to get out there before the tournament. Look forward to another episode very soon. I got another guest lined up, special guest who I've already had on lined up for this coming weekend, as well as planning to do an episode solo to talk about some things I've watched recently. I plan on doing a new series where I talk about movies and TV shows that I've been watching that I would recommend. So thank you for listening. If you listened all the way through, thank you for your time. Kory, thanks for joining. If you cannot find any of my old episodes on Apple Podcasts or Spotify or Amazon, old episodes can all be found on Vince, the Film Nerd, the YouTube channel. Otherwise, recent episodes you should be able to find on any of those podcast stores. Until next time, I'm Vince with guest Kory Schrauben on the Film Nerd Podcast, and go watch some movies.